up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Hoopers Lounge with Max and myself. The NBA season has officially concluded, and the streets of Manhattan are still partying after the New York Knicks won their first NBA championship in over 50 years, clinching the title on Saturday, winning the series in five. And you might not be thinking a five-game series was all that competitive, but this was arguably the most entertaining five-game series at least I have ever watched in my lifetime. Every single game came down to the wire. It was exciting from start to finish. The two teams were both very evenly matched. Max, I'll let you give your opening thoughts of the finals. What do you think about this Knicks Spurs series as a whole?
The series was awesome, like you said. Every game was competitive and entertaining in its own ways. You had multiple guys step up for both teams, which I thought was really fun to watch as well. The arenas, too. Shout out to the Knicks fans because when they traveled to San Antonio, you could feel their presence. I thought that was really cool. I don't remember the last time I've seen an NBA Finals where the road team has such a strong fan base heading away from home. So that was really unique to see. I really enjoyed that while watching the games that were taking place in San Antonio, and then obviously the atmosphere that is the Garden. So I thought the series as a whole, like you said, for a 5-game series, it's the best it could possibly be. I think if we were told before the series started that it would be over in 5, I think you and I would be a little disappointed in that. But I am not disappointed with the quality of basketball that was on my television for 5 straight games.
Yeah, not at all. And there were a lot of just interesting outcomes to come out of these five games. I don't know which of these stats is more insane to me. The fact that the San Antonio Spurs in all five games had double digit leads at one point, or the fact that the Spurs in the last 3 minutes of all five games also at one point held the lead. I mean, the Spurs had this. The fact that it ended in five with those two scenarios, I sent you a post on Instagram. I don't know if you saw it, but the Spurs had the lead for 72% of the finals and went on to lose in five games. It's statistically just so unlikely that they would lose in the way that they did. And yeah, I mean, game four is the one that everybody's going to remember. That 29-point comeback by the Knicks. That is the one that everyone's going to be talking about. But all of the Knicks' four wins featured comebacks that required resiliency and never giving up and maintaining faith in each other as a team and as individuals. It's a great win that the team is, I'm sure, is very proud of. The entire state of New York is incredibly proud of them. I can't imagine being in New York right now. The atmosphere there must be awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's a testament to the type of basketball that's being played in this era. 20-point leads are just not what they used to be anymore. Even in the regular season, like if your team has enough firepower, you can. If you're down 20, I feel like you can come back as long as you have a full quarter left to play. I feel like you can come back from anything lower than 20, and that's just with the 3-point shooting, the skill of these guys to hit tough shots at this point. So that 29-point comeback is incredible. But some of these other comebacks, like 12 to 14 points, like those happen every night in the NBA, it feels like these days now. And I think it's just it's so hard to, these teams are so evenly matched, and the skill gap between like every team in the league is not as great as you think it is. So any night a team can come back from a double digit lead per se. And also when you think about it, like a double digit lead is 3 threes and a free throw. Like think about that. Like that takes you, if that takes you a minute and a half to get back if you get a couple stops, right? So I think it's just a testament to how fast paced the game is that these comebacks are so achievable now, because teams are just running, getting easy buckets. Defense is turning into offense. So I think the comebacks, while it is insane, the Spurs lost in five. It doesn't surprise me that the Knicks were able to come back because I just don't think it's as difficult as it once was to come back from a 15-point lead.
Yeah, I agree about the pace of play, but it's also just this Spurs team seems to have an issue with closing out games. I mean, even against the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Spurs would get out to a quick lead, the quick start in the first quarter. They looked dominant. They looked like they're about to blow the team out. And then the Thunder spent the next 2 or 3 quarters clawing their way slowly but surely back into the game for us to get an exciting last 6 minutes of the game. It was I think it's how 6 of the 7 games of the Thunder Spurs series played out. Spurs getting out to a huge lead, Thunder coming back throughout the game. And that, I think, is a testament to the Spurs' inexperience. I've been talking about that all playoffs. Um, just their inability to hold a lead and play down the stretch. It really showed itself against the Knicks, who have a battle-tested previous NBA champion coach in Mike Brown, as well as a core team that has been through many playoff runs together. The Knicks know how to lose together, and they also know how to win together. The Spurs, this is their first run. They were learning how to do all that this year. And in the last 3 to 5 minutes of every game, you could tell offensively, the Knicks had a plan. Get Jalen Brunson the ball, let him go to work either in isolation or the screen and roll. And if he passes you the ball, shoot the damn ball. That was the Knicks offense in crunch time, and it worked beautifully. They knew their identity. The Spurs did not have much of an identity. They didn't have a go-to option or a go-to set play to run when they needed a bucket. And their offense just stagnated down the stretch when you needed bucket the most. And yeah, for a young playoff team, I don't think it's necessarily a huge long-term concern, but that the inexperience, their lack of quality play down the stretch is what cost them this year's final.
Yeah, absolutely. I think going off that point, I think coaching was the biggest mismatch in this series. Mike Brown, to me, I know the Spurs got out to all those big leads like you mentioned, but it just felt like the Knicks were more prepared to make adjustments throughout the series. Mike Brown clearly had a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D on both offense and defense in this series, and it felt like Mitch Johnson had one plan, and if that plan didn't work, then they were screwed. And that was kind of what I witnessed. Mike Brown's ability and preparation to make the necessary adjustments throughout each game and in between each game as well, I think is one of the reasons why the Knicks are the champions today. We talked about the coaching matchup in our preview, and I gave the edge to Mike Brown with his experience, and I didn't think the gap would be as wide as it was when I was watching these finals, but I think Mitch Johnson is one of the bigger, pieces to blame for why the Spurs didn't win this series. I didn't like how he handled players' minutes in particular. I didn't like how he managed play calling down the stretch. I think the ball was in the wrong players' hands down the stretch, and we can get into that a little later on. But Mike Brown deserves a ton of credit. And he, to me, is the one piece that got this core over the hump. Because this is the same roster from last year, pretty much. And Mike Brown, to me, is the needle mover. He was the guy that moved the needle for this core, and I give him all the credit in the world for that.
Yeah, quick question. Mike Brown is now a two-time champion. Do you think he's a Hall of Famer?
I think so. I think this run solidified him as a Hall of Fame coach. Just with his previous success. I mean, think what he did in Sacramento. I mean, not a lot of guys can do that in Sacramento, too. I know it didn't result in a championship, but I would give him credit for that as well. I think that helps. When you build a small market like that into a top 3 seed in the Western Conference, and you have probably arguably the best season in their franchise's history, you could say. I think that also adds to his resume as well. So, yeah, I would put him – he's a fringe Hall of Famer. Like, I'm not saying he's a lock, but, yeah, I would say he's a Hall of Famer today. Yeah.
The fact that taking the Knicks to the championship and taking the Kings to the playoffs are the top 2 marks on his resume. I mean, I think that just shows how impossible of a job Sacramento is. That's a state city that's impossible to win in historically, or at least over the last 2 decades of basketball. Spurs rotations are something I want to talk about later down the line, but I cannot believe we got this far into the episode without mentioning Jalen Brunson, who had one of the greatest 5-game stretches in NBA Finals history. He scored 30 points in 4 of the 5 games, with his last closeout, Game 5, being a 45-point masterpiece at a time where the Knicks needed it. The Knicks scored a total of 94 points. 45 of those points came from Jalen Brunson. He carried them in his backpack to that Game 5 win into the NBA title. Truly, that was an all-time performance from Brunson. I know we were talking about it a little bit last night, and the more I think about it, the more I realize, yeah, this was truly an all-time great finals performance from it's something we might never see again. It reminded me of Kemba Walker's UConn run, the way he was able to just take over games down the stretch. I mean, The fact that he didn't win Clutch Player of the Year this year is kind of a disgrace.
Yeah, it reminded me. This series just reminded me how important having an elite guard on your team is. Like having a guy that can dribble the ball up the court against full court pressure and navigate one of the NBA's best defenses like it was nothing is truly remarkable from Jalen Brunson. And to me, I know like you said, we talked about this. He's the fourth best player in the league to me right now with what he just did. Unbelievable. He was unguardable in this series. And Stephon Castle is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. And Jalen Brunson was flat out unguardable. They tried to put Dylan Harper on him. That really didn't work. And nobody, even when he got switched on to Wembanyama, he was not scared. I think of the game 4 Hezi pull up in his mouth to cut it to 1. The Hezi layup he hit 2 nights ago in game 5 when they were like down 6 against Wemby. He ISO'd Wemby from the top of the key and got a layup. Think about that. Mm-hmm. That is nobody else, not a lot of people in the league can do that. There are some guys, but not a lot of people can do that. So what Jalen Brunson was doing offensively was just straight bag work. There was no foul baiting. There was no shooting heavily contested shots and forcing it. He was getting to his spot, and even if the Spurs were contesting it, it didn't matter. Jalen Brunson was in the zone, like you said, for most of this series. I think the first 2 games he was a little inefficient, but I think as the series went on, you started to notice that he started to learn the Spurs defense, and by game 5, like you said, he backpack job. Just a carry job by Jalen Brunson. But just because he carried them in game 5, I don't want to spread the message that he carried them all playoffs, because I think everyone on this team had their moments. Specifically, OG in game 4 with a 30 bomb. He was awesome, including the game winner. Cat in the first 2 games, maybe game and a half, you can say, was arguably the best player on the court. So, I mean, the Knicks won this finals as a team. Jalen Brunson is obviously the catalyst to the team, but I don't want to, spread the message that it was all Jalen Brunson and that he carried the Knicks throughout the entire playoffs, because that's just not true. That this Knicks team had the most dominant run, in my opinion, since the KD Warriors, and one of the more well-rounded teams I've seen. I think this team is very comparable to the Celtics that just won the championship a couple years ago. Like, you look up and down this roster and you think to yourself, where is the weakness on this team? Like, where is the weakness on this Knicks roster right now? I can't find one. If you want to point to defense in Brunson, that's fine, but I feel like he silenced that doubt, and the rest of the team's defense has improved dramatically. Like, Cat is no longer a liability on defense. He's not an all-NBA defender, but he can hold his own on defense now, and I think that just goes to the bought-in mentality that these guys have to win a championship together, and I could see them winning another. I don't know if they will. I don't know if I'll predict them to, but this core, to me, still has another 3 years at least in them with Mike Brown at the helm.
Yeah, I don't know about winning another, just because of the parity we've seen in recent NBA years. I mean, I think the last 3 NBA champions, or maybe even the last 4, the Nuggets, the Celtics, the Thunder, we have said after they've won that this looks like they're going to be a dynasty. And not only have those 3 teams not won again, but the Nuggets and Celtics have not even returned to the conference finals. So the NBA is in an era of parity where it is truly fluctuating more year over year than it ever has before. And there are still some pretty hefty dominoes that could move this offseason. Right? The Celtics are going to be elite next year. The Heat have been in the Giannis sweepstakes for a minute. The Pacers are getting Halliburton back. I mean, the East and the Pistons, they just won 60 games. They're surely going to be good. There's a lot of top-tier talent in the Eastern Conference that picking a repeat winner after what we've seen for basically the last decade, yeah, I don't know. Could they win again? Yeah, sure. But the Charlotte Hornets could also win a championship, right? Anything can happen. I wouldn't, you know what I mean? I wouldn't bet on the Knicks. There are a lot of teams I would bet on winning a championship before the Knicks. For what it's worth, though, I did look at the odds for next year. The Spurs and the Thunder are tied as co-favorites at plus 250. The Celtics are the 3rd team at plus 600, while the Knicks are 4th at plus 700. So the Knicks are up there in terms of repeat chances, but I think I would take those top 3 teams over the Knicks if I were predicting the 2027 winner today.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I even wrote down in my notes that, speaking to the parity, there's no guarantee either of these teams make the finals next year, right? I think of what happened to Indiana. One injury turned them from finals contender to lottery team, right? So there's never any guarantees in sports. And so I feel like while people are, and this is my one thing about, a lot of people are, congratulating the Spurs on a great season, which they should. But also, when you get to the finals, you have to take advantage of every opportunity because there's no guarantee that they get back. Everyone believes they will. The odds books believe that they will be a favorite for the championship next year, and I do believe they'll be competitive enough to make another run. But who knows? Maybe Game 7 flip-flops and Shea gets the best of Wemby, and they are on to the finals next year. Or maybe Dylan Harper gets injured in the first round and is unable to continue, and they get upset in the second round. Like, you just never know. So, like you said, with the parity in today's game, the Knicks and the Spurs are on the same playing level as everyone else next year. And I think the league is in a great spot with parity. It's in a great place because any year, the guys on the team, the fans behind the team can truly believe it's our year because there are no dynasties right now. The Thunder were one game away from what I believe to be a dynasty, and the Spurs took that away from them. And so now it'll be interesting to see, who wins each conference next year. But I agree with you. I think the Spurs, Thunder, and Celtics heading into next season should be favorites. I'm really interested to see what the Celtics do, but we'll talk about that in a future episode for sure.
Yeah, I'm more interested in the Pacers. I think that's the most fascinating team just to look out for next year. We'll talk about the Spurs more in depth in a little bit, but just to talk about the Knicks some more, what of the 5 games was your favorite game? Is the game that you will remember the most? I'm assuming the 29-point comeback, but
Game 4, I'll never forget watching it live. I was in Greenville with one of my buddies, and we were watching it on his couch, and we were both pretty tired, and we told each other at halftime, like, if they don't start cutting into this lead, we're going to bed. And every 5 minutes, it was like they got 5 points closer, and they got 5 points closer, and they got 5 points closer, and then they took the lead, and then they lost the lead, and then OG hits the game-winning tip, which, by the way, I do want to talk about this play. Nobody I haven't seen talk about Brunson's IQ. People are saying that pull-up 3 in double coverage was a bad shot, but when you see Wembanyama that far away from the basket, why wouldn't you shoot it to generate a better chance for an offensive rebound? To me, that Brunson shooting it with 3 or 4 seconds left on the clock in double coverage over Wemby is one of the smartest plays I've ever seen from a guy that people are calling that a bad shot. Why would you shoot that? All that stuff. Real ball knowers know that was a great play. And if Brunson had taken a couple extra dribbles, he might not even get a shot off. But he decided to jack that up knowing it was a 4-on-3 with Wemby all the way out near half court, unable to get the rebound. So I want to shout out Brunson for that play because that to me is an IQ. That's a play that like Jay Wright instilled in his head in college, right? That's how you win championships, little things like that. So I didn't know if you caught that, maybe if you had the same thoughts as I did on that, but OG with a great tip. I'm not taking anything away from OG, but Brunson's IQ to get that thing on the rim as soon as possible when he saw Wemby trap is one of the smartest things I've ever seen.
Yeah, I completely agree. Wemby wasn't the trap. Wemby was man-on-man covering him. It was De'Aaron Fox that left OG Anunoby, the inbounder, and came to help on the trap. So Brunson, I completely agree, did the absolute right thing. When you see a double in the game's winding down, you get the shot up as soon as you can because you're giving your teammates a 4-on-3, not just a 4-on-3, a 4-on-3 with the other team's opposing center out of the picture. And this is the Knicks. This is a team that has been great at rebounding all year. So if you're the Knicks and you're Mike Brown, I like those odds. I take the 4-on-3, and I think one of my guys can get that tip in. But for as good of an IQ play as it was by Brunson, that was just equally as bad from De'Aaron Fox. Because the inbounder is the one man that you need to keep track of. You cannot lose where the inbounder is on the court. Because that is the guy that always gets lost and always gets that open three-pointer or always gets that tip-back dunk or put-back dunk to win the game. De'Aaron Fox is the veteran on the. But by the way, this isn't even the biggest mistake De'Aaron Fox has made this game, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Because the mistake he made about 10 seconds prior was infinitely worse. Oh my god. But De'Aaron Fox is the veteran. He is supposed to be the guy that's coaching the younger guys up. That know your personnel thing is supposed to be his calling card compared to Castle and Harper. He's supposed to be that veteran leader, that stabilizing presence. And to make mistakes like that, simple mental mistakes down the end of the game, yeah, I know San Antonio fans are incredibly frustrated with Fox on social media, and I don't blame them. That's got to be so frustrating to see, not just from any player on your team, but from the guy who's supposed to be your vet leader. That's rough, man.
Yeah, I wanna offer the same sympathy for Fox that I did Chet, because I don't like to judge players when they're at their worst. And I talked about this when we, talked about Chet. I do think Fox will bounce back from this. I don't think he's washed. People are saying that he should lose his job and all that. No, the guy's still an all-star caliber guard in my mind. That layup, though, that got blocked by OG was one of the dumbest plays of all time. Why you don't dribble that out and get fouled to shoot free throws makes no sense whatsoever. And that is a boneheaded play by what you said is the veteran leader. But let's not forget, this was his first finals too. It's not like De'Aaron Fox has been here before either. I know he's older than these guys, so that naturally makes him the vet on the team. But this was everyone's first finals on the Spurs that got significant playing time outside of Harrison Barnes. So, again, while De'Aaron Fox, he's easy to pick on right now. I get that. He did not have a great series. It doesn't help him that his teammate Dylan Harper outplayed him. That doesn't help either. Because if Dylan Harper had a bad series, are we really talking this bad about De'Aaron Fox? Probably not. So that doesn't help Fox either. That Harper was arguably the Spurs' most consistent player through 5 games. I think you could argue that's totally fair. That Harper consistently, when he was on the floor, you knew what you were getting from Dylan Harper every single night of the finals. And that was a walking 15 to 20 points. He was amazing. And transitioning to Harper, I also want to talk about another Spur that absolutely disappeared. 6th man of the year, Keldon Johnson. How the hell did this guy win 6th man of the year? How in God's green earth did this guy win 6th man of the year? Because his teammate, Dylan Harper, who, may I remind you, also comes off the bench, who definitely met the criteria for 6th man of the year this year, was unequivocally better than Keldon Johnson. Not just in this series, by the way. I think he was better all playoffs than Keldon Johnson. Mm-hmm. And so I'm asking myself, who the hell voted for Keldon Johnson? And how the hell did he win 6th man of the year? I don't know. I didn't watch enough Spurs ball during the regular season to really watch him play, but was Bro averaging like 18 off the bench in the regular season? Like, I don't think so. Like, he was not.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah, like, he wasn't some sensational 6th man like a Lou Williams type or a Jamal Crawford type that, like, when he came into the game, the offense ran through him and he was just getting buckets in his limited minutes. Like, I don't know. That was, like, as bad as Fox was, I would argue that Keldon Johnson was the worst Spur in this series. Like, he was worse than De'Aaron Fox to me in this series. Because I think Fox defensively was still fine. He got rebounds. He got some steals. Offensively, he was inefficient and not good. But Keldon Johnson was, like, unplayable in this series. Like, unplayable in this series. He was not good. He was not confident. There was a point where they were guarding him from 3 like he was Draymond Green. Like, that's the 6th man of the year, bro. Get out there and guard him, and the Knicks didn't give a shit. So, what are your thoughts on Keldon Johnson? Because I think he's avoiding some slander because of the De'Aaron Fox hate, which I don't think is very fair.
Yeah, he's avoiding. I mean, yeah, Keldon Johnson disappeared. I'm not disputing that. But also, he's avoiding the slander because he's a bench player. They didn't lose the finals because of a bench player. You lose the finals because of your starters. You can win a finals because of your bench players, right? You can't lose one because of them. It's your starting 5 that is more or less responsible for keeping you in the game, right? And to your point, De'Aaron Fox, yeah, he didn't have a terrible series. Game 5 notwithstanding. Game 5, he was terrible offensively, besides the point. But Game 4, he didn't even have a bad game. I think he finished with 18, 5, and 7. That might be wrong, but the numbers are somewhere around there. And you know what? 18 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists. That's a good game. It's It's not a great game. It's not a terrible game. That is a good game from your starting point guard, right? You would take that 10 times out of 10. But it's those two plays at the end of the game that everybody is going to remember. That when you think of De'Aaron Fox, you're going to think of him getting that layup attempt blocked. I mean, he's being compared to J.R. Smith relentlessly on social media right now just because of the blunders that those two made in their respective finals appearances. And about Dylan Harper, he lost the sixth man of the year to Kellen Johnson simply because Kellen Johnson played more minutes. Dylan Harper's role in the regular season was small. It was tiny. I would be surprised if he played over 20 points, if he played over 20 minutes a game. Right? And I know we've talked about this a lot. I gave him a B+ rating this rookie season, not because of his talent, but because of his role. You have Flag averaging 20 points a game. You have Edgecombe at the third or sometimes even second option on a playoff team. And then you have Dylan Harper, who was a seventh man at best in San Antonio. Right? So that's why my rating for him for the regular season was low. But when the playoffs arrived and rotation shrunk and you started having to keep your best players on the court, Dylan Harper proved he was too good to keep off. I mean, in that finals, he was Spurs' second best player. As a rookie point guard is your team's second best player in the finals. That is genuinely incredible. Dylan Harper has an absolutely limitless ceiling. Okay? And for offseason moves, I don't think the Spurs really have to do anything. Like we said, this is the youngest team that has reached the finals since the 1977 Portland Trail Blazers, right? They don't have to do anything. But if I were running the Spurs, the one thing I would do this offseason is find a way to get Dylan Harper in a starting lineup. He is tremendously talented, way too talented to be playing that same limited role he had in his rookie year. And that can come in a bunch of different ways, right? Maybe you can convince De'Aaron Fox to take a bench role. Maybe. If not, then I do think De'Aaron Fox should be a trade candidate this offseason. Or if Mitch Johnson is a believer in that three-guard lineup, maybe you trade Julian Champagnie and for a more traditional four and start those three guards together with Castle at the three and then Fox and Harper in the backcourt. You know, there are a possibility that the Spurs can navigate, but the one thing I know is that Dylan Harper, without a doubt, has to be a starter next year. He is too talented to not be.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with you. And that role that held back your rookie grade, I decided not to hold that role against Dylan Harper's talent and skill. And that's why I gave him the same grade as a VJ Edgecombe, for example. Because Dylan Harper, to me, proved what I already knew, and that he was the second pick for a reason. He was the second best player in that class. And he proved that to me all playoffs long, that Cooper Flag is amazing, but Dylan Harper is right up there. And I would say he's just as good talent-wise as Cooper Flag after what I just watched. He was unbelievable for the Spurs. The other thing in the offseason, while we're talking about Spurs, they got to fix the non-Wemby minutes to me. Kornet he had a great season, by the way, first of all. Luke Kornet had a great season, and he made one of the most memorable plays of this postseason with the block in Game 7. Mm-hmm. But Wemby, I don't know if this is because Wemby's impact on the court is so great when he's out there, but the non-Wemby minutes are slowly turning into the non-Jokic minutes, which were a nightmare for Denver in multiple playoff runs. Mm-hmm. And I felt like in the finals, the Knicks absolutely abused the Luke Kornet minutes. Like, absolutely destroyed them. So that, to me, getting Harper in the starting lineup, I think, is self-explanatory. That's not going to take a whole lot of, intellect to figure out how to do that. I think you need to either develop more depth so that it's not always Kornet coming in for Wemby. Maybe you do, you have, Kornet, and then you have, a stretch five, and depending on how the game's going and what you need, that's who you substitute in for Wemby. I just think more depth at the center position will really help because Wemby, to me, looked gassed in this series. Bro was exhausted at the end of Game 5, it felt like to me, just because of the amount of energy he had exerted really throughout the entirety of the playoffs, not just in the finals. But when you're a guy that tries that hard on both ends of the court, as opposed to a guy like Brunson who tries very hard on offense and is thrown in the corner on defense by his own coaching staff. Mm-hmm. Wemby does not have that luxury. he is relied upon to obviously drive their defense as the anchor, but then offensively, he's also looked at as the number one option. And I think to me, that tired him out a lot this playoffs. I don't know if his body was really prepared for that because of the needs the Spurs needed him to do, like what they needed him to do to advance throughout these playoffs. So the non-Wemby minutes, I think, is the biggest point that needs to be addressed in the offseason for me. That's just my opinion on that.
I completely agree with that. I mean, when you watch the series, I mean, when Wemby was in, yes, Jalen Brunson would hit, his tough mid-range jumpers, his patented fall-away floaters that only Jalen Brunson and a few other players can hit. But the second Wembanyama would leave the court, the Knicks' game plan would be attack the rim, attack the rim, attack the rim. Because the greatest rim protector in the NBA is gone, and you're replacing with Luke Cornett. Which, like you said, he had a great season. Respect to Luke Cornett. But Luke Cornett is no elite rim protector, man. That is not just one step down from Wemby. That is a whole skyscraper down from the level of rim protection that Wembanyama provides. So it was very evident throughout the series. As soon as Wemby left the court, the Knicks would attack the paint. It was a very, I mean, you don't have to be the basketball genius either to realize, hey, the 7-4 guy isn't on the court. Let's attack the paint. Right? Anybody who watches the game can realize that. But like you said, that is a big reason on why the Spurs lost. And that's a big reason why the Knicks were able to cut into the leads they were. The Spurs jumping out to 12 to 15-point leads. They sit Wemby for 3 minutes. Next thing you know, it's a 6-point lead. And then it's a competitive game again. So like you said, the Spurs were not good in the non-Wemby minutes. And as good as we talked about Castle and Harper as perimeter defenders, I mean, they were getting absolutely shredded by Brunson and Anunoby, especially when Wemby wasn't in the court. They were getting blown by like it was nothing. So, yeah, I completely agree. The non-Wemby minutes are something you have to fix, considering your backups were Mason Plumlee, Bismack Biyombo, and Luke Cornett. You got to do better than that behind your superstar. In terms of players they could acquire, I am not completely sure. I think they need a more physical center rather than a stretch three. That offensive rebound at the end of the game by Mitchell Robinson is sticking in my head. That Wembanyama was truly just bullied off of his spot. And like you said, he probably was tired. He probably was fatigued after carrying both loads of the court for, the entire postseason run. But that still was not a good look. And you need a center who's able to handle the other team's burly centers, the other team's, 260-pound, 7-foot behemoths. He outweighs Wemby by 30 pounds. He's going to push him around on the block. So I think that is the archetype that the Spurs need to look at more so than a stretch five. Just someone who can handle the physicality, somebody who isn't afraid to handle the big boys down low in the paint. Maybe throw an elbow or two. Although Wemby did that a fair share of times this playoffs. But they need a burly center is my point.
Yeah, the one name that comes to mind, and this is one Warriors legend, I feel like could fit this team. Like Kevon Looney to me is someone that would help this team a lot. A guy that crashes the glass, knows his role, makes everyone around him better. Like you don't have to worry about him, right? And I don't know how much better Looney is than Cornette. Like those guys to me are very similar, but I know Looney was one of the main reasons the Warriors won a championship in 2022 because he was able to hold down the fort back there and let everyone else, do the finesse stuff. So maybe Looney is a guy that comes in for Wemby, or I don't know. What are your thoughts on the Spurs experimenting Wemby at the 4 and playing like a too big lineup? What do you think about that?
Look, I mean, in Wemby's rookie year, he was saying he wasn't opposed to playing point guard, right? I mean, the skill set that he offers for size offers him truly unprecedented versatility. I'm not saying Wemby couldn't play point guard, right? I don't think his handle is nearly tight enough. But at the 4, hell yeah, he's more than quick enough to get past. Even if the team plays a small forward at the 4 and tries to play small ball, Wemby is still quick enough to get past him. And obviously, he's tall enough. So yeah, that's not something I hate with at all. But I do think for that to work, Wemby is going to need a more consistent perimeter jump shot. He had a couple games this postseason where he knocked down 3 or 4 threes and the shot looked great, but he also had stretches, multiple games, where he was not knocking down his three-pointer at all. So I think in order for that to be a threat offensively and not get all cluttered up in the paint, Wemby will need to improve his three ball, because if you're playing two bigs, you are taking away driving lanes for Castle and Harper, which is what those two guys do best in their own respective games. So, yeah, that's something you're going to have to do. Or you look at a pure stretch five, a Brook Lopez type guy, when he was with the Milwaukee Bucks, a center who just stretches the floor, and that's about it. Something like that could work too. But one of the two is going to need to become a threatening three-point shooter for that to work, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you that Wemby needs to improve his shot. I think the Spurs as a team need to improve on their three-point shooting. Vassell and Champagny obviously are specialists, but everybody else, like Castle, Harper, Fox, even Keldon Johnson off the bench, Wemby, they all need to improve their three-point shooting, in my opinion. And also, what goes hand in hand with that, if you know that three-point shooting is not your strength, right? You're not terrible at it, but it is not your calling card. I thought the Spurs in this series took too many threes. Their shot selection, to me, you're too good at getting to the basket and getting to the free throw line to take as many threes as they did as a team. And I thought their shot selection, and maybe that's coaching, right? Coaching is telling them, like, hey, get your threes while you can when you're open. To me, the one guy that took too many threes was Castle. Like, you should be driving the paint every time you have the ball. It's either drive or kick, or drive and score, or drive and get fouled for Castle. I thought he took a lot of threes. He hit the big one in Game 3, so shout out to him. He hit the dagger there, but him and Wemby, I thought, just took too many threes from a shot selection standpoint. I think they could have got better shots for their team in key moments in this series.
Yeah, Game 4 specifically, that's a great point for shot selection. The Spurs went into halftime with a 26-point lead, and you would think the game is over. And it seemed like the Spurs almost went into the third quarter trying to chew up clock rather than continuing to run their offense and put points up on the board. I mean, it felt like 10 straight possessions. The Spurs offensively, they would get one of their guards to dribble out 20 seconds of the shot clock and then take a contested step-back three-pointer. And for 10 straight possessions, it felt like that. And then the Knicks slowly claw back into the lead. They make that 26-point lead a 16-point lead. And the Spurs call timeout. They go on a mini run themselves, get it back to 20 points. And then they do the same thing to start the fourth quarter. Start chucking up threes, and then the Knicks claw their way back in again. Shot selection, and I've harped on inexperience a lot, but I'm going to say it again. You're taking those shots in that moment because you think you already had the game won, and you're worried about time rather than the scoreboard. And that is the mark of an inexperienced team that hasn't really suffered losses like this in their time playing together. The Spurs won 60 games this regular season. They didn't lose a lot of games, and they lost even less games that they had double-digit leads in. So, obviously it's easy for us to sit here and say, yeah, you gotta stay locked in for 48 minutes. But for a young, inexperienced team, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And yeah, I think that played a large role in the Knicks being able to come back and win the series in the way that they did.
Yeah, I think the combination of inexperience, like you said, and fatigue leads to chucking up threes because you don't have as much energy to drive around your defender and get to the basket and get hit again, get knocked down, get it back up. Like, that takes a lot out of you. And I think fatigue also put into a little bit of a factor there. I want to move on to something that's been on the internet recently, and I don't want to say I'm 100% in agreement, but there is some merit to what people are saying. And as a Wemby fan yourself, like, we know how you feel about Wemby. This is a question I have for you. Is Wemby a dirty player, or is he slowly becoming one? And let me just give you some context behind this question. The Naz Reid elbow, to me, was 100% a dirty play. He looked at him right before he cocked him in the neck with an elbow. The play in Game 3, I believe, where he shoved Jalen Brunson by the back of the neck to the ground was, in my opinion, a dirty play. And then there was a play, as a Warriors fan, that I remember in the in-season tournament. Steph Curry was coming off an off-ball screen, and there is a clip of Wembanyama deliberately sticking his leg out to trip Steph Curry running off an off-ball screen. So that is 3 instances to me where I would say that's a dirty play. Now, that doesn't necessarily make him a dirty player. So I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on some of the excessive chippiness from Wemby we saw in this postseason? Do you think he's becoming a dirty player? Do you think he's already a dirty player? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, the narrative is there. You have a great point because Wemby picked up 3 flagrant fouls this postseason, which put him 1 away from a suspension. He even got one of those flagrant fouls overturned after the game, so which prevented him from getting suspended for a 4th flagrant foul point accumulated in the postseason. So yes, the physicality bordering on dirty, I will say, was there, but I am going to, and I do have to say, I think it's more immaturity than dirtiness. I mean, I'm thinking about that Jalen Brunson play, and right before, you have Jalen Brunson kind of almost boxing out his legs, right? This is a 6-foot guard that's kind of taking out a 7'4" guy's legs, and Wemby continuously is losing balance. That's got to be frustrating for him, right? I mean, that is how he has to be guarded, and yeah, that's the only thing Brunson can realistically do. But I'm sure for a 7'4", 22-year-old, it's got to be frustrating to have guys constantly going for your legs. So sometimes if he feels like the refs aren't protecting him, he needs to protect himself. He throws Jalen Brunson to the ground. He's kind of sending his own message like, hey, watch what you're doing. Was it dirty? You know, I can see that. Yes, I think it was. And I think Wemby needs to have much more control over his emotions in the game itself. Because those 3 flagrant fouls that he picked up throughout the postseason, those were momentum changers, right? I think about that elbow on Nasri that he had. The Timberwolves won that game, right? I don't think they win that game if Wemby stays in. So there's moments like that where he's 22, he's going to get emotional, and I don't think that's a bad thing. In fact, I think it's a great thing that he plays with so much emotion. I love to see it. But he also needs to be able to keep those emotions in check on the court more often. And I think he will as he gets older. I don't think it's much of a problem. He needs to learn how to be physical without being dirty. Just look at Kobe, right? A play that I've seen a lot in response to this is Kobe running through his teammate Pau Gasol's chest in the Olympics. Nobody was calling that dirty. They were calling that physical. They were calling that sending a message. Now, I will say, throwing an elbow is very different than that, right? But my point is there are other ways for Wemby to show his physicality and send a message than the way he was doing this postseason. And I think that as he grows up, as he gets older, as he learns, he will understand that. Is he a dirty player now? No. Did he have some dirty plays? Yes. But I don't think he's going to be a dirty player, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't like to call people dirty on a couple, instances. But why I believe the Brunson play to me is 100% dirty, just because there's other ways to get him off you than by taking your hand and to the back of his neck and shoving him face first to the ground. Like, there's other ways to get him off you, especially when you have that big of a size advantage. Take both your hands, shove him into his chest, and tell him to get off me. Like, that's all you have to do, right? But when Brunson had his head turned, he grabbed him by the back of his neck and shoved him face first into the ground. That, to me, was undoubtedly a dirty play and undoubtedly his 4th flagrant foul, which should have suspended him for another game. So that, to me, is kind of where I think the discourse is. Like, if the refs had called it, I don't think people are really coming at Wemby because they called the elbow, right? And people don't talk about the elbow because the refs called it, they ejected him, and we moved on, right? So I agree with you. I don't think he's a dirty player, but he did have a number of dirty plays. And that's honestly not the thing that bothered me most about Wemby in these finals. And I want to get your opinion on this as well. What did you think about him walking off the court after Game 5 and not shaking players' hands? Because it's a bad look for you to do that when your head coach is currently shaking hands with Jalen Brunson. Like, Jalen Brunson won the championship, and the first thing he did was shake Mitch Johnson's hand. Before he celebrated with his dad, before he celebrated with his teammates, he shook Mitch Johnson's hand and said, good series. While at the same point in time, Victor Wembanyama is walking off the court, back turned to the entire Knicks organization. That, to me, is a worse look on Wemby than the elbow, than shoving your head, than the quote-unquote dirty plays. So I want to get your opinion on that as well, because I lost a little bit of respect for Wemby for not shaking the hands of a team that beat you, because I would expect Wemby would probably say that if he won that series and the Knicks did the same thing, that he would expect them to shake his hand. I would think so. I would think so. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think the dirty players are a much worse look. But my thoughts on it, that's the difference between a 29-year-old and a 22-year-old. That's really all I think it comes down to. I mean, Brunson has been in the game for a while. He is a vet of the game. He knows that the importance of sportsmanship and respecting your opponent. Wemby is 22 years old, and he historically throughout his career has been a sore loser. Right? I know we were talking a few weeks back, and you were saying if the Thunder won, Wemby would have given props to the Thunder. No, he would not have. Wemby would not have done that. He would not have given props for a second to the Oklahoma City Thunder. He would have been pissed all offseason about it, replaying those moments in his mind all offseason. Because Wemby is a legit psychopath. As much as this man loves to win, he hates losing even more. And losing in the finals in the way that the Spurs did specifically, you have a big lead 4 games and you choked 4 games away. That, especially that game 4, man, that's got to be demoralizing for Wemby. Obviously, the right thing to do is to go shake the other team's hand, say, good game, you got us this time, pick your head up. I mean, you had a great run. But Wemby, historically, throughout his basketball career, has never been that kind of player. He's the kind of player that takes losses very personally and very hard. This was a man that was crying after he lost the All-Star game, right? This has been on display throughout his entire career. Is it bad sportsmanship? I can see how it's argued that way. The way I see it is passion and love for the game and an absolute disdain for losing, right? I hope that in the next couple of days, Wemby will reach out, maybe apologize, maybe say good series. Because I agree, it's not a great look for your team superstar to be walking off the court after losing the finals without congratulating the other team. It's not a good look. But I genuinely think it just comes down to his passion and how much he hates to lose. It's not something you love to see, but it's not something I am losing respect for or anything of the sort.
Yeah, I kind of disagree with that. The reason I said that I thought he would shake the hands of the Thunder players if he lost is because I had faith that Wemby was a good sport. But now I know, I have proof that Wemby is a bad sport, I think you could say. And I agree with you that he has a lot of passion and love for the game, but I'm a firm believer that you cannot truly love the game you play without respecting your peers that also play it at the highest level. And to me, Wembanyama has not shown respect to his peers. He can love the game for himself, but I don't know how you love the game without respecting the people that also play the game at a very high level. So,
can I drop a name real quick?
Sure.
Kevin Garnett.
Yeah,
and
look at Kevin Garnett's reputation. That is not somebody that I respect as a basketball player. He's great. I'm not taking away his greatness, but as a person and a sport, I do not respect him to the same level I respect LeBron or Steph or Kobe or Michael Jordan or Shaq. Does that make sense? Like, yes, you're right. There are other players that have shown this level of disrespect to their peers, to their, colleagues, so to say. But that doesn't mean that that gives Wemby a pass in my mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. I'm not justifying the right. I'm not trying to sit here and justify the behavior. The right thing for Wemby to do would have been to shake the hand of Coach Brown and Coach Brunson and the entire Knicks roster. That would have been the right thing to do. He did the wrong thing. I'm not trying to defend that. But Kevin Garnett, I gotta say, I don't respect him as a person, but I sure as hell respect him as a basketball player. And I think his passion and just the way that some players just need a certain drive in order for them to succeed to the best of their abilities. For Kevin Garnett, that was shit talking. That was being as disrespectful as they possibly could on the court. That drove him. Pissing the other player off drove him to heights that he wouldn't have been able to hit had he not been doing that. Is he an asshole? Yes. Kevin Garnett is probably the biggest asshole that's ever played in the NBA. Did that assholery, I don't know if that's a word or not, but is that a part of what made him a superstar. Also, yes. So I don't think you can say, I respect Kevin Garnett, the basketball player, without also, realizing that this is part of the package deal. This is who Kevin Garnett is. And I'm not saying Wemby is Kevin Garnett, although we got trained by him in the offseason. I'm not saying the two are the same, but I also think we are kind of overblowing the reaction of a 22-year-old who just lost an emotional 5-game NBA Finals. Um, I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's necessarily poor sportsmanship in the heat of the moment. And I do think Wemby will go back and do the right thing, and send a message or reach out and try to apologize or send a quick congratulations. There's a bare minimum amount he can do, and I think he will do it. But I'm not losing respect regardless. It's just a tough emotional situation.
Yeah, and that same tough emotional situation, the last 5 finals that we're about to rank, every loser has shaken the hand of the winner every year. So everyone's dealt with the same emotions Wemby's going through, regardless of age. And to me, it's more of a personality trait of Wemby to have that. He needs that hate that fueled him against Chet. He needs to develop that to be at his best. And I think he's trying to develop that by walking off the court, not respecting his peers. And to me, I've lost a little bit of respect for Wemby because of that. And that's okay if you haven't, right? But I think what he did is the clear-cut definition of poor sportsmanship. It's the clear-cut definition of poor sportsmanship. And the heat of the moment, last year, Tyrese Halliburton, obviously he had the torn Achilles, but his teammates, right, in Game 7, shook the hands of the Thunder after they won. 2 years ago, the Mavericks, Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, shook the hands of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown after they lost in the NBA Finals. It's the same moment. It's the same emotions. It's obviously different to everybody, which is why I'm saying that I lost a little bit of respect for what Wembanyama did. Now, the other thing I didn't see is I believe some teammates also followed Wembanyama into the locker room without shaking the hand. So this also does not just apply to Wemby. He was just obviously the one guy that I saw, and he obviously led the group down the tunnel. So the heat of the moment thing, every year there's a loser of the NBA Finals. And more times than not, the loser does acknowledge the winner with some sort of handshake, dap up, a wave, something. And that is good sportsmanship. And Wemby displayed bad sportsmanship at the end of Game 5. And I, for that, have lost a little bit of respect for him. That's all.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I see your point. I don't necessarily call it bad sports. Like I said, I don't really have a problem with it. But to your point, if other teammates did follow Wemby into the locker room, that does make it a bigger problem. Because Wemby knows and realizes that he is the emotional leader of this team, that the team runs through him, that they look up to him, that they want to see what he's doing, and they will do the same thing. Wemby knows that. The team knows that. Everybody involved in the Spurs knows that. So there also comes a certain point where Wemby is like, okay, I'm the emotional leader of this team. They're going to look up to me. I need to keep my composure. I need to do the right thing. And the fact that he went into the locker room instead of shaking the hands, I don't know if other teammates of the Spurs did or didn't, but if they did, that's probably why. If Wemby didn't, I can't imagine any of them would either. So to your point, yes, that is another part of the reason why Wemby has to just be more aware of these situations and be able to handle his emotions in a more mature way. It happens, right? You're 22 years old. You're going to have your immature emotional moments. It happened to us. It'll happen to him. But like I said, I don't necessarily think that Wemby's reputation as a poor sport or as a dirty player is solidified because of this playoffs.
Yeah, I don't think it's solidified, but I do think we're heading in that direction because I think that's just his personality. And like you said, this is a guy who's shown it before. It's not like this is the first time we've seen it. You even brought up the All-Star game. Think about, I don't even remember the Olympic game against the U.S. Did he shake their hand after they won gold and he won silver? I can't remember that. Like you said, there are other instances of this. This is not like, just because it's his first playoff run does not mean it's the first time that he's been a sore loser. And I just think that is his personality. And I don't have as much respect for someone like that as I do people who take their L on their chest and respect the people that straight up beat them. That's just my opinion on that.
Yeah, I just think that's something where we have differing opinions on. I don't necessarily think sore losing is the worst thing in the world, because losing sucks. It sucks. Nobody wants to lose. You don't go into the game expecting to lose, and so especially when you put as much effort as they did and worked as hard as you did, when you lose, yeah, it's a really shitty feeling, and it's kind of hard to show grace to anybody. Um, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a sore loser, but I will say there are moments, or like there have been pickup games that we have played in middle and high school that I lost, and I was pissed after. I was straight up mad that I lost to you, right? Like you said, good game, and that my hand, and I like looked at the ground, barely acknowledged your hand, and walked off. And I was mad. And then, like 20 minutes later, we're talking about it. I'm like, yeah, that's a hell of a game we had. That was really fun. But in the heat of the moment, yeah, losing that game is not fun. It sucks, and it's not a good feeling in the slightest. And it had nothing to do with you beating me. It was frustration at myself for losing. It wasn't like I was trying to disrespect for winning at all. Again,
Yeah.
I just think that's something that we differ on. But I've never hated sore losing. I don't think sore losing is a bad thing. I think that shows how much you care.
Yeah, and again, I think you're right. I think we just differ on this because I hate losing too. And I know more than a fact you can hate losing with your entire body, mind, and spirit and still be a good sport. You can do both. Because I've done both. And I've seen other professional athletes in all sports do both. So, Wemby, yes, his passion for the game and his hatred for losing are impeccable. And like you said, similar to Garnett, that will help him become a superstar if he hasn't already become one. But just because you have that on this side does not mean you can't be a good sport either and respect the people you play the game with and the people who, in all fairness, just beat you in the NBA Finals. So that's just my opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, Wemby has to grow up. That's not up for debate. If he was 27 and doing this, I just think it would be a lot worse than him being 22 and doing this. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand that. But I don't like using your age as an excuse. Because it's an excuse. At the end of the day, it's just an excuse. Like, I'm 23 and I understand that you can still be a good sport, right? So I'm only a year older than Wembanyama. I'm sure he fully understands that it's not that hard to shake the hands of the guys that just beat you, right? That's just my opinion on that. And I think sore losing is like when I see sore losers like in pickup or whatever, yeah, I look at them differently. I'm like, bro, it's just pickup. Fucking shake my hand. Why are you walking away and not saying anything? Like it, honestly, to me, it's a little embarrassing. I guess that would be the best word I could use to describe it. Is it's a little embarrassing to, and obviously the NBA finals are totally different than pickup. I'm not saying that, but when I see sore losers out, wherever in life, you can be a sore loser in life, like make excuses for not getting a job or make excuses for getting out of shape. Like, and I see sore losers like that. That's just embarrassing to me. And I don't know, maybe embarrassing is the better word than disrespect. Maybe it's embarrassing. Maybe I'm embarrassed of Wemby for how he acted.
I think embarrassing is a great way to put it because, I mean, I am embarrassed when I don't lose with grace. I look back on it, it's the moment that I'm not proud of. But in that moment, when my emotions are so high, that's not something that's easy to remember. Is that something that everyone can improve on? Yes. But that's just how it is at the end of the day. Embarrassing, I think, is a great way to put it because those are embarrassing moments for yourself and for those around you. Just that's not something that's easy to remember after you lost Game 5 of the NBA Finals.
Yeah, but again, like, you shouldn't. I don't want to say you shouldn't get credit for doing or not doing the easy things. Like, I don't know how to phrase it, but just because it's not easy to do doesn't mean you still shouldn't do it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. The right thing to do is usually the hard thing to do. But any other parts of the finals you want to talk about before we get into our last segment?
No, I think Finals MVP, obviously Brunson deserved that wholeheartedly.
Mhm.
They got that right. We talked about everything else I had written down, and congratulations to the Knicks. 53 years is a long time for an organization, with as good of a reputation as the Knicks to go 53 years without a championship. That is awesome for their fan base, awesome for the city of New York, and I am very happy for them because they were they had a great postseason run, and I think looking back on it, you could say they were the best team in the playoffs, and it's always good to see the best team come out with the championship.
Mhm. I agree with you there. I think the Knicks were by far and away the best team. You don't go 16-3 in the playoffs without being the best team. Truly a historic run. But that'll take us to our last segment of the episode, where Max and I have ranked the last 5 finals. And this ranking is essentially just based on fan entertainment. How much fun did we have watching the finals? So we have ranked the last 5 winners, with those being the Warriors, Celtics, Nuggets, Thunder, and Knicks. So, Max, I'll let you get us started. Let's hear your top 5 last finals ranking.
Yeah, so I'm going to start at the bottom. For me, this ranking was split into 2 sections. The top 3, I felt I was way more entertained than the bottom 2. And I'll get into a little bit of my reasoning. But starting at number 5, I'm going with the Celtics Mavs. I remember this series being over in like 5 games, and really the only thing I can remember about it is Luka Doncic being a traffic cone on defense, which to me was just not fun to watch at all. I can't remember any memorable games or like finishes. It felt to me like Boston kind of was rolling through Dallas for most of this series. I think the closeout game in Game 5 was like a 20-point win. So yeah, this to me was the worst series of the bunch. Number 4, I've got Nuggets Heat. I put this a little bit ahead of Celtics Mavs, only for the fact that Miami as an 8 seed making this finals made it way more intriguing heading into it, because they were like the true embodiment of the underdog. Like nobody believed in them to get that far, and yet they were 4 wins away from an NBA championship. Combine that underdog story with my personal love of watching Nikola Jokic play basketball, I put that a slot above Celtics Mavs, but I think those 2 for me were like the clear-cut bottom 2 final series. Number 3, this is tough. The top 3 for me, like I enjoyed all of these. Number 3, I'm going to go Thunder Pacers. I think this would be number 1 if we witnessed Tyrese Halliburton in Game 7. Like truly, I believe it doesn't get better than a 7-game series. But when a guy tears his Achilles in the first quarter of Game 7 and like the air is just sucked out of your lungs, when you know the guy that got them to the championship, right? The main focal point of their team just disintegrated on the court in front of your eyes. That obviously took a little bit of the wind out of the sails. And the Thunder, to me, compared to the Warriors and the Knicks, I just didn't enjoy watching them play basketball as compared to the other 2 champions. So that's why I have them at 3. Number 2, I have this most recent finals, Knicks Spurs. I would also put this number 1 if it went an extra game or 2, I think. I did write down, though, Game 4 of this series is the best game of the last 5 finals, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That game, I enjoyed watching that game. There is obviously a little bias with my number 1 answer. But Game 4 of the Knicks Spurs to me was one of the greatest basketball games I've ever watched in my life. And so that is another reason why it's at number 2. I think if it went 6 or 7, it had a clear argument for number 1. But it being over in 5 games knocks it down to number 2. And then number 1, obviously, I got my Warriors shirt on today. Warriors Celtics. Steph Curry's Game 4 performance down 2-1 with a little 43-10 spot on the road. Doesn't beat that. Then Game 6, he decides to do this to the crowd halfway through the third quarter because he's beating their ass so bad. So, and combine that with my favorite team and my favorite championship that they've won. 2022 was an awesome year to be a Warriors fan. God, so many great players on that team that will just be forgotten. Kevon Looney, I mentioned him earlier. Wiggins, Jordan Poole, Clay. So just so many GOATs. Just so many GOATs on that roster. and that takes the spot for number one. But I think if you put any of the really that or the Knicks, I could feel have an argument for one. Thunder, I think, obviously are in the top three, and then the bottom two. That's kind of how I did my ranking.
Yeah, no surprise at all that you put the Warriors at one. I think as soon as I said the Warriors were in the last time, I was like, all right, that's going to be his one. Who's taking number two? Dropping the old Larry Bird quote. But I agree with you. I think that our structures were the same. There was a clear bottom two, and there was a clear top three. The order that we had them in differed a bit, though. At 5, I had the Nuggets, just because I really could not tell you a single play from that entire series. Like, the Nuggets Heat was a quick 5-game wrap. There wasn't really any competition. I mean, yeah, the Heat offered some intrigue as an 8 seed, but it also became very clear very quickly that they were outmanned, and could not keep up with the Denver Nuggets. And when you see that, it does kind of take away a lot of the anticipation for the series. There wasn't a lot to be excited about. 4, I had the Celtics. I mean, a lot of the same reasons as the Nuggets ranking them this low. However, I also remember Peyton Pritchard hitting 2 half-court shots, and that was pretty cool. So because of that, they go 4. That's literally the only reason. I can remember one more play of that series than a can of Nuggets Heat. But neither of those two series, I would say, were particularly exciting or even that memorable if you're not a fan of the winning teams. Number 3, I have the Thunder. And as the only series in the last 5 years that went to 7, or the only final series that went to 7, I did have a hard time ranking it this low. But also, my personal circumstances, I was in Barcelona, Spain, at the time of this series, where it was 6 hours ahead, and I unfortunately could not watch every game because the games there started at 3 a.m. And staying up that late when I had class the next day was not always possible. I did stay up for Game 7, though, and I remember being so excited to watch Game 7 and that the Indiana Pacers might actually pull off this Cinderella story. And then Halliburton tears his Achilles. And I have seen a lot of NBA injuries as my time as a basketball fan. Derrick Rose, Paul George, Gordon Hayward, these traumatic injuries. But I truly think that Tyrese Halliburton injury, all circumstances considered, is the worst injury in NBA history. I have never felt so sad because of an injury in any sport, honestly, than I did with Tyrese Halliburton's injury in that moment. That was just painful. And I really think even if he played the game and Indiana ended up losing, it would be a lot easier to put the series 2 or even 1. But that injury puts a damper on the whole series. The Indiana Pacers might be the only losing finalist that will be remembered more and talked about more than the actual winning team. And it is because of that injury. So that's what, me being in Europe, and that injury is why it came behind these other 2 games, even though the series as a whole might have been more competitive than my second place series, which is the Warriors-Celtics series. I have it this high because I'm a huge Steph Curry fan myself, and seeing him get that Finals MVP after 2, maybe even 3 times of being snubbed for the award was so satisfying as an NBA fan. It was so gratifying. Like you said, Boston going up 2-1, it looked like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were about to launch this next dynasty, right? The next Golden State, if you will. It looked like the Celtics were about to be that. And then the Warriors win the next 3, blow them out in Game 6. Yeah, Steph has the iconic ring knee celebration. That was just tremendously satisfying ending as a basketball fan with it, and there were good games throughout, but the result of the series, I think, is why it is this high. And number 1, this may be recency bias, but I have that Knicks Spurs series as my most entertaining series of the last 5 years. I said at the beginning of this episode, I think it is the most entertaining, the greatest 5-game series in the history of basketball. All 5 games were competitive down to the wire. The Spurs had leads in the last 3 minutes of all 5 games. Right, there were clutch buckets in every single game you could point at, and there is an alternate universe where the Spurs have won this series in 5. Just how the games played out. That was how competitive it was. It was every game was 50-50, and the Knicks simply executed down the stretch better. But in terms of level of competition, in terms of entertainment, I think this was definitely the most competitive series of the last 5 years, even though it finished in 5 games. And because of that, I think that's in large part, again, recency bias probably coming into play, but I think that's in large part of why I took my number one spot.
Yeah, great list. I think we tiered the series very well. And if I wasn't a Warriors fan, I think I would have concur that the Knicks Spurs was like unbiasedly a more entertaining series. I think I would agree with you on that. Although I do think the Thunder Pacers just going 7 is a more competitive series than a 5-game series. That's just kind of my opinion on that. But yeah, the Knicks Spurs, I do think the atmospheres in the arenas for Knicks Spurs is like the Knicks fans in San Antonio. You heard them every single time the Knicks scored. It was unbelievable. I can't remember a time where that were the case. And New York just simply like I know they have the most fans because they're a huge market, but like shout out to them because they took over San Antonio what felt like every game.
Yeah, and it made the atmospheres definitely the most memorable atmospheres of the last half decade of NBA Finals. And just want to say, if we did the last 6 NBA Finals, put the Bucks at number 1 unanimously, not even a discussion. My goat Giannis needs his flowers.
Yeah, with like half the stadium filled because it was still COVID and that like the expanded benches. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, but because you're a Bucks fan, I totally understand your logic behind it. That was I'm sure that was a memorable run.
Memorable is an understatement. That was a once in a lifetime run. But that'll wrap up this episode of the Hoopers Lounge, and that'll wrap up our entire season recap at this point. We've made it officially through the entire NBA season. Shout out to us, but we are still becoming hot and heavy with lots of off-season content. We have a lot of ideas planned. Stay tuned for that. The NBA draft is coming up in about a week and a half, and you know, something surprising might come up, but I predict our next episode will be our final mock draft before the draft itself. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you guys then. Peace.
Peace out.